Here's some good rivalry. Also, that team standings that we talked about. We've got Sam Smitty in here for the Tigers.
There you saw the lane assignments. 3 Penn swimmers in this 1650 final. Distance has definitely been a strong point for them throughout this meet.
Right, we also see 2 Yale swimmers. We've talked a little bit this week about this Yale-Penn distance rivalry, and so far we've seen Penn come out on top, and I think we might see that again tonight based on the performance of Chris Swanson in the 1,000 last night, but it is the last night of these championships. You never know how the third day of the competition is going to affect people, so most of these swimmers were not swimming this morning. They had the morning off. Their coaches let them sleep in at the hotel, get some extra rest, and they weren't as emotionally invested in the meet this morning, so tonight they're a little fresher and can get out there and really do something.
Now, if Chris Swanson can pull off the victory tonight, that means a few things. It means he sweeps the distance events for the second year in a row, and it also means, specific to this event, that he will have won the Ivy title in the 1650 all 4 years of his career here in the Ivy League. That's tremendous.
And it's not something we see a lot of. You know, the Ivy League can be very challenging for freshmen when they come in here their first year, and it's not just adapting to a new program, it's adapting to the rigors of academics. So for Chris to be able to come in here and have an immediate impact, not just for Penn, but also to the league, is impressive, and it shows why he's a next-level swimmer.
Now, as we said, Chris Swanson in the middle of the pool there. Now, currently leading the field, Brian Hogan, who has a little bit of a history with Chris Swanson, having touched him out by 14 100ths in the 1,000 2 years ago.
Right, we haven't seen that much of a rivalry between these two head-to-head. We've talked about the Yale-Penn distance rivalry in general, but that's been more about points. It hasn't really been about, Hogan beating Swanson. So I think Hogan's realizing, hey, this is my shot here. I'm going to go for this, and he's playing a little catch-me-if-you-can game.
Chris Swanson in the middle of the pool. Taylor Ucelis, the sophomore out of Penn, above him. Below him, that's Kei Hyogo, sophomore out of Yale, runner-up in the 500 on day 1 out of Yokohama, Japan. He's had a bright young career so far at Yale.
Yeah, he's been very impressive for the Bulldogs, and anything from the 5 free to the 4 IM. The interesting thing, it's a good problem to have for Tim Wise, is that, on day 2 he could do the 1,000 or the 4 IM. So it's a little interesting to see where he's going to be able to score the most points for the Bulldogs. I might even say those could be his 2 best events, and they just happen to fall on the same day, but he's so versatile that he's going to be in the top 8 wherever he is, and that's, as I said before, a great problem to have if you're Coach Tim Wise.
Now, again, we talked at the top of the broadcast about that Harvard and Princeton team race right now. Penn is going to obviously close some ground with several swimmers in this final, but they've got a little too much ground to close if they want to win this title. So let's talk about what we have here between Harvard and Princeton. You got Sam Smitty in 2, kind of falling back right now, but what does he realistically need to accomplish in this final to keep Princeton in this thing?
He needs to finish in the top 8, and this is a different event in the mile, because what that means is all those earlier heats counted. Anyone from those earlier heats can score in the top 8 here. It's not like we're going to see later in the rest of the night where people are locked into their spots, whether that be 8th, whether that be 16th, whether that be 24th. These guys have something at stake. They can definitely fall below. So what the Tigers need is for Sam to get there in the top 8. They had a strong swim from senior Zach Rideout in his last mile of his career to be able to win his earlier heat. So he'll probably fall somewhere in the consolation heat once these are all done. You don't always have every swimmer in the last heat of the mile do so great. There's usually one swimmer that will sort of fall off, so I'm sure some of those people from this afternoon will definitely have an impact, and we'll be keeping up to date with that as well.
Now, on the flip side of that, Harvard has the lead. What do you think their team strategy is? What do you think Coach Tyrell told them at the beginning of this session to try to get them to that team title?
Make every swim count. It's probably the exact same speech that Rob Orr gave to his guys. Harvard's going to have a little bit of an advantage here in terms of momentum and just feeling like they're on top, because they're going to get a boost from this 1650. It thins out a little bit for them as we go through, and we talked at the top of the night about Cole Beasy and Kei Hyogo having those doubles. Those are both very talented swimmers. Kei Hyogo has competed internationally and represented the United States. Colbezy has swum with a lot of international people. He's from Michael Phelps' team with Coach Eric Posgay and Bob Bowman down there in North Baltimore. So he's used to swimming at a high level. He was a junior national finalist as well. So I don't think the double's going to phase those guys that much, but when there's this much on the line, you want to be as fresh as you can be. So it certainly is going to be a factor.
Chris Swanson, senior out of Penn, this is going to be his last individual race of that decorated Ivy League career. Again, he swept the distance races last year at this championship. Won the 500 on day one, won the 1,000 yesterday, and here he is currently leading the 1650, setting himself up for a trifecta 2 years in a row.
Right, and fortunately for Ivy League fans, this won't be the last we'll see of Chris. He'll be down at NC2A, so we're looking forward to seeing where he can do there and hopefully capping off a great career in short course, and we'll see what he can do this summer with Olympic trials coming up. But definitely sending our best wishes to all the Ivy League swimmers who make that NC2A championships, and we won't know exactly until the conclusion of the Pac-12 meet, which is next week for the men. So these guys are going to have to do the best they can tonight and then sort of hang on for a week to see where the chips and the cards fall as they head into the NC2A championship season.
Now you've had some strong swimmers. You had some strong swimmers at Princeton during your time there, like a John Christensen. What is the benefit? I see, you got two sophomores from Penn, Taylor Ucelis, Alex Peterson, both in this final, had 2 years to train with Chris Swanson. What kind of impact do the Chris Swansons and the John Christensens and some of these all-star athletes have on that younger generation?
Yeah, it's something that you go to your admissions officer and you say, look, this kid's going to be a program changer. And I think that's what Chris Swanson's really been able to do there. We talked with Brendan last night, and I really believe that Brendan came to Penn and performed well at Penn at a pivotal time. And off of the success that they were having with Brendan, we're able to get athletes like Chris Swanson and then really build from that. And we kind of saw for a couple years the Crimson and the Tigers weren't really recruiting as many distance swimmers, so it left an opening for a school to really be dominant. Harvard's been very dominant in the distance races, so Penn really took advantage of that, as did Yale. So we can really see, just based on the other swimmers in this heat, what Chris Swanson's been able to do for the Penn distance program.
Chris Swanson in the middle of the pool, Tampa, Florida native. Still leading this field, Kei Hyogo, the sophomore out of Yale, below him, keeping him within striking distance. Brian Hogan, Hyogo's teammate, also from Yale, the senior, the top of your screen, currently in third. And then a tight race for that fourth spot. Again, like Mitch mentioned earlier, though, they're not just racing the swimmers in this heat. They've got a field from earlier to race, so they're racing the clock as well. Brendan Novak.
Sure, Brendan Novak had a great swim at 15:10. Not necessarily his best time. I think he was a little faster in high school, but we've talked this week about how that's almost irrelevant. You're here for points, and yes, you want to do best times, but you want to get placings as well. And let's keep an eye on that meet record. Last year, Chris Swanson flipped at 8:31.21, so he is under that by a fair amount. We saw this in the 1,000 last night. I misspoke and said that if he was ahead of that meet record, he wasn't going to fall off. He did fall off it a bit, so we'll see if he can be under it the whole way tonight. He did mention in his interview with Alex last night that he was a little disappointed in his time. Keep in mind he is mostly rested for this meet. He's not quite getting the full taper because Mike Schnur does want to get the Quakers on the board at the NC2A Championship, so they gave him about 7 days rest. He did shave. Chris is a motivated and highly motivated swimmer, so he's not the kind of guy that's going to want to settle, and let's see what he can do with this meet record here.
And we saw that tight race for the fourth spot in the team standings. This event obviously will be big for Yale in that aspect.
Absolutely. Talking with Coach Jim Bolster before the night started, and we'd asked him, where do you think you're going to fall? And he said, well, we're going to see what happens in this mile here. They have 3 swimmers in it, and Columbia will have some people up here in the strokes later on. But definitely that's a highly contested race, and it's great to see Cornell in the mix for that too. First-year head coach Wes Newman coming through after Joe Lucia retired last year. Wes Newman, a highly decorated Ivy League swimmer, had a win in the Ivy League in the 2 free and briefly held the the meet record before Doug Lennox led off that 4x200 freestyle to break it. But Wes Newman had a great career. He's still got a lot of Cornell records. He's young, he's fired up, and he's got the Cornell Big Red swimming really well. Did also hear from some other coaches, not from Wes, he's a humble guy, but I did hear from some other coaches as we were commenting on his performance about the caliber of recruiting class he's got coming in next year. So no signs of showing down for the Big Red there.
Big Red finishing in 6th in the team standings last year. Coming to tonight in 5th place. Definitely within range of Yale in 4th.
Right, and Josh, just to switch points here, important for our viewers at home to know that Ivy League record pace for Chris Swanson was 10:45.18. So we'll see him flip here, and he is killing this meet record pace. He is on fire.
Well ahead of the record pace is Chris Swanson. That meet record he set last year at this championship, 14:45.12.
He's looking
lower
great.
That this year.
He's looking great here. We talked all week about his gallop, and we're seeing that here. He's not quite galloping as much. He's more rolling. He's getting into his pace. That gallop's really going to kick in as he brings his legs in towards the end of the race. And if the Penn Quakers have any idea what sort of pace he's on, I'm sure they're going to start putting their arms up and screaming pretty soon, and they'll get him going.
Now, Hyogo, the sophomore, hasn't really let Swanson get too far away. He's having a pretty strong swim as well.
He is, and I think this is great for Hyogo here because he knows Chris Swanson's not going to be there next year. So this is just as much his chance to assert himself in the Ivy League as it is to score points for Yale, and he's certainly doing that tonight.
Chris Swanson in lane 4, still on record pace in this 1650.
That record pace that you spoke of was 11:38. He flipped at 11:35, so he's about 3 seconds ahead. Record pace was 12:05. Continuing to stay about the same distance under.
Swanson turns at 12:02.08. Hyogo 12:06.62. Swanson starting to creep up on some of the swimmers behind him. This is obviously an extremely talented field. You know you've got something special when you see someone getting lapped in the final.
Exactly, and I mean just over there in lane 5 we've got Alex Peterson from Penn, a very, very phenomenal swimmer, and for Chris Swanson to be catching him, it just shows how great Chris is. Alex Peterson there is part of that Aquazot contingent of club teamers. We'll see Danny Tran and Koryo Kubo and Alex Peterson all coming from Brian Parr's program out there, and they've had a great history in the Ivy League, and Brian's done a tremendous job in developing not just good swimmers, but also well-rounded people that have brilliant academics and can compete at this level in the Ivy League.
You see Chris Swanson's cap starting to come off a little bit there. Keep an eye on that. But it's actually got to be motivating in a 1650 when you start catching people. It gives you something to shoot for after you've been so far ahead for so long.
Right, it's that carrot that just gets dangled in front of you, and we talked last night, he got in a bit of dead water in that 1,000, and we talked about how it can be lonely out there, and you've really got to know your pace. When you've got someone in front of you who can give a little motivation and a little more competition, even if you know you're winning, to really get you moving. That cap really is falling off for him there. I don't know if that'll be as big of a factor. Some of these swimmers train without caps. Usually a bigger deal on the women's meet when you see that with the longer hair that can really slow them down for drag, but he's really picking it up there.
100 to go in this 1650 for Chris Swanson. He flips at 13:48.66.
Record pace was 13:52.87, so he is well and truly under.
Still well under that 1650 meet record. Starting to pour it on now as he's getting set to turn for that final 50 in his final Ivy League race. The senior from Penn, Chris Swanson, meet record pace. That cap's starting to come off now, but I don't imagine it's going to stop him.
Here he goes, and we'll see him really gallop as he comes here. There's those Penn swimmers raising their hand. Kicks come in, gallop's coming into the wall.
Here comes Chris Swanson, who's going to win the 1650 in meet record time, 14:40.18. Kei Hyogo, the sophomore from Yale, comes in second, but it's all Chris Swanson. He completes the distance sweep for the second year in a row.
And there you see him giving congratulations to Kei Hyogo. I think it's sort of the passing of the torch there. We'll see next year for sure. An important swim there for Sam Smitty, getting fifth at a 15:10.43. There was also a 15:10 this afternoon from a Harvard swimmer. We'll get that those final placings up for you soon. But what we do know is that every single place here is going to matter. Now, Brendan